And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast here on Anchor. Well, it's not called Anchor no more, but we're going to keep on saying it. I'm Jovan Alford. You already know who I'm joined by, my guy Harrison Brown. We're back again, talking some football. I'm trying to remember the last time we did a pod. It was a few weeks ago when we were breaking down quarterbacks in this year's draft class, which was a very good podcast. Probably one of my favorite podcasts that we've done, in a while. So definitely check out that podcast if you haven't already. But like I said, this is a Total Sports Live podcast. Me and Harrison back at it again as we're going to talk some NFL free agency, which has gotten off to a crazy start. But in addition to talk about those Philadelphia Eagles, who some fans were a little panicky when free agency started. And they didn't see the Eagles out here just making moves how we usually see them do, like making moves there. They've been a little quiet, but they're starting to make little head waves here and there. But they're also on the back end, as expected. We've also seen them lose some players in free agency, which was expected. So we're going to talk about that on this week's podcast. But as always, before we do that, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Got to get better with the Twitter game over there. I'm slacking low key. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. Make sure you're checking out the website, totalsportslive.com as well. And make sure you're checking out the podcast on all your various platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, because I'm still going to call it Anchor, right. iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast from. You can also check out the podcast on video on YouTube. Just search Harry Brown-Russo on YouTube and just hit that good old subscribe button. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you can check out the podcast, but also check out the NFL draft vids that you've been putting out over the last couple of months, which have been doing really good on YouTube, and they've been really good. So make sure you're following us on those platforms and following Harrison on YouTube. So Harrison, back at it again. Like I said, free agency talk. We had a plan to do one podcast, but we switched it around, remixed it, and was like, oh, let's talk about the Eagles because they actually made some moves today, which kind of just worked and coincided with what we actually had planned. But always glad to be, sitting down and recording a pod with you on this day.
Yeah, man. Great to be here with you. You mentioned it. Not on Anchor anymore. We're on Spotify for podcasters. I think Anchor definitely sounds better for now. We'll figure something out for the intro, but definitely great to be with you. You mentioned it. 2-pod week. That's always a fun time. It's NFL free agency. You guys already know it's draft season. We're right around the corner, about a month and a half from the draft. So as always, man, a lot to cover. Great to be here with you. We're talking birds tonight. That's right in the wheelhouse. So should be a good one.
It definitely should be a good one. But before we talk about those birds, we got to talk about what has happened around the NFC East, because the NFC East has been making some moves to other teams over these first couple of days of free agency, even though it's not technically free agency. It's the legal tampering window. And the new league season doesn't start. The new league year doesn't start until tomorrow, aka Wednesday. When you listen to this podcast, the new league year will be starting tomorrow. But we still call it free agency for what it's worth. And like I said, we had some moves here. The Dallas Cowboys, they acquired veteran cornerback Stephon Gilmore in a trade from the Colts. The Giants, they acquired star tight end Darren Waller in a trade from the Raiders. So both NFC East teams are getting their trades on and didn't have to give up a lot of draft capital in neither trade, which I think if you're a Cowboys fan or a Giants fan, you have to be excited about that. And last but not least, former Commanders quarterback Taylor Heinicke signed a 2-year deal with the Falcons. So not a lot of major moves in the NFC East, Harrison. Well, not major in a ton of moves, but significant moves by the Cowboys to add to that defense, specifically at secondary, having someone opposite of Trayvon Diggs, and then the Giants getting themselves a bona fide pass catcher for Daniel Jones since they committed that 4-year, $160 million contract to him. And then, like we said, Heinicke going elsewhere now to Atlanta to back up Desmond Ridder.
Yeah, looking at the two trades in particular, it's two really talented players joining the NFC East, no doubt about it, and a surprisingly low draft compensation for both players, particularly Darren Waller at pick 100. I mean,
that's like borderline like fourth round, right?
It really is the back of the third round. We're backing out that third round. The Eagles have Dallas Goedert, one of the best tight ends in football, and for pick 100, I might have checked in on Darren Waller, even if I'm the Eagles. Right. I know it doesn't make sense cap-wise, but geez, if it's that low, why not check in? It's a good move for the Giants. It adds to their offense. I think that's an offense on the rise. Certainly someone that will they made the playoffs this year, played the Eagles tough, in multiple games. There'll be another talented team next year. Dallas, you mentioned it. That secondary, certainly, really talented on paper. Everything's got to kind of gel together next season for Dallas. But, with the addition of Stephon Gilmore playing opposite of Diggs, Wilson at safety spot, certainly a talented secondary. Like I mentioned, surprisingly low draft capital. I think that kind of just speaks to, in general, if you're in one of those GM chairs, like you said, that's almost a 4th round pick for Darren Waller. Like, that's just kind of all day. Even if it really doesn't work out for the Giants, like, what did they lose? They haven't opted out after next year. They only gave up, that pick 100. I mean, the Raiders might pick another tight end with that 100th pick. They might go out and try to add.
You got to think you got to think that they will, right? Because on Foster Moreau.
He might even be a free agent right now too. I read.
Yeah, so they got to add.
Maybe like Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State at that 100 spot. But at that point, I mean, wouldn't you rather have Darren Waller? So certainly a surprising trade. One that I wasn't really expecting to see today.
Yeah, that and very surprising. And like we said, Taylor Heinicke going from DC to the Falcons, and now the Falcons have their backup for Desmond Ridder. We think that Ridder will get the opportunity to be the starter, but in Washington, it looks like they're going to be ushering in the era of Sam Howell, which we first thought when we first heard it at the end of the regular season. You're kind of like, this has to be like just like rumor talk, or just throwing like a smoke screen out there, like, we're going to make Sam Howell our quarterback 1. But it looked like it's the real deal, because I don't think they have no other quarterbacks on the roster right now. Once they release Heinicke's a free agent with Atlanta, it really is going to be the Sam Howell show with new offensive coordinator and assistant head coach Eric Bieniemy in DC.
Certainly seems that way. I'd feel much more comfortable if they at least added a veteran quarterback, which I would assume they will. I think that makes more sense than going out and drafting another mid-round guy. Jovan, you know this. I'm a big Sam Howell guy. I was a fan of him in college. We were talking about this pre-show. I think he kind of has that similar Matt Barkley effect, where if he was in a different draft class a few years earlier when his buzz was at its peak, this is a guy who was an early first rounder. People are trying to trade up for. There's a lot of buzz around. So Sam Howell, I mean, I'm certainly, fine with him getting an opportunity in the NFL. Like I mentioned, I'd love a veteran backup in that room. Matt Ryan was released today. I don't know how much tread Matt Ryan has left, but that's the type of quarterback that I'm thinking about, is someone that's played a lot of NFL football, has a lot of experience, and can come in and help Sam Howell, help him get adjusted. Looking at Atlanta, I actually think that's a perfect quarterback room. Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heinicke, I think that's the perfect design. You're letting Desmond Ridder get his opportunity while having a really serviceable quality backup in Taylor Heinicke. And maybe they push each other and compete in the preseason. Maybe Heinicke starts a game or two. I think for Arthur Smith and that crew, this is, a big time year. It's a put up year. Yeah. This is the year. NFL head coaches don't get 4 years to put together a program, especially not offensive minded coaches who have some weapons and it just really hasn't gotten going. It's a big year for them. So if Heinicke winds up being a guy who could help save Arthur Smith's job, I think that was a really good signing for them. Perfect backup. If anything's to happen with Ridder, if he's, not ready or whatever the case may be, Heinicke is a really serviceable number 2. So I like that move a lot. I think Heinicke will also do a really good job helping Desmond Ridder. If Desmond Ridder is the starter, we saw it in the XFL. Taylor Heinicke was backing up Jordan Ta'amu. So I think Heinicke's the perfect type of guy to be a backup. I think he knows the role. I don't think it'll be, a huge hit to his ego and something that really bothers him. I think he's the perfect guy for that quarterback room.
I mean, we've seen guys like Chase Daniel, make buku bucks. The Chad Henneys
best job in the world, man.
Right, the Chad Henneys of the world. They just sit back. Call me when you need me to come in.
Right.
But I'm just here going to make my money. And
Colt
like
McCoy.
Colt McCoy. Yeah. So I mean, the opportunity's there for him. Like you said, they probably will let Ridder, take every opportunity that he can. And obviously a guy like Heinicke is going to push him because he's a competitor. And he's a competitor at the position. We've seen it, when he's played. He gives it all out there. So I think he will. Push him. However, it is Ridder's job to lose. Yeah. But we've seen, countless of times, and especially this season, right, where so many quarterbacks this past season, where so many quarterbacks got hurt and so many quarterbacks starting, second string, third string, fourth string. Doesn't matter. You need a good backup in Atlanta. Like you said, this is also a big year for Arthur Smith, right?
Yeah.
They got to get something done here, right? They got to do something. They added Jonnu Smith in a trade earlier, I think on Monday, right? On Monday, they got him from the Patriots. So they got Jonnu and Kyle Pitts, but they still got to add some pieces at wide receiver. But Heineke, a solid backup, should help them going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I like to pick up a lot. Like you said, I think it's Desmond Ritter's job to lose. I thought that he did a lot of really positive things at the end of last year. After he got a few starts and really got his feet, I really thought he was starting to put together some good starts. Looking forward to seeing what that offense can do. Drake London, he needs to have a big second year. If he can take that step, that could really help them out a lot. So
they need to get them weapons. They need to get them weapons.
That'll be big.
That was, I think, the biggest thing for me, because like you said, his first start was a little rocky, but then, like you said, after he got into a rhythm, he was like, hold on, like he could do something if he had weapons to throw to at wide receiver.
We've started to get into that mock draft season. They're sitting at 8. Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson. How about Jackson Smith and Jigba? Someone that I'm really intrigued by. That could be a little bit higher than what people are projecting him, but we see it every year. There's guys. Look at Derek Stingley Jr. last year, was kind of maybe projected to go 10th, 11th, wound up going 3rd. I could see Jackson Smith and Jigba going 8 to Atlanta. I think that would be a good spot for them to go and add a really top tier playmaker. I think receiver kind of gets a little murky later, but at 8, they can definitely go make a move.
Hey, it's gonna be fun to see how that plays out and see how their team building goes, because, like we said, they have the young quarterback, they have the backup. You add Jonnu Smith, who didn't really pan out in New England, but we saw what he was able to do in Tennessee with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts had a down year. Hopefully, he gets it back together, and hopefully Arthur Smith realizes what he has at tight end. So it's going to be fun. Not fun. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the offseason pans out for the Falcons, because they have some things they got to fix. Obviously, they added, I think, Jesse Bates too.
Yeah,
defense, which I think is huge. Pair him back to Richie Grant at safety, and you already have AJ Terrell. So they're making some moves slowly but surely. And the fact that I knew mostly all the players on the Falcons was also mildly disturbing. And I'm not even a Falcons fan, so. mildly disturbing. But we got to talk about another bird, and we're talking about those Philadelphia Eagles, the one with the green, not the black and red. The Eagles, they've made some moves, specifically today. They made some moves finally after, there was a lot of panic in Eagles Twitter and the streets once when they saw all these players leaving and exiting out the door, which we'll talk about shortly. However, they kind of quelled the noise with some moves today. They signed free agent running back Rashad Penny to a 1-year deal worth $1.35 million with $600,000 guaranteed. Max value of $2.1 million, essentially a prove-it deal for him. Team also re-signed veteran running back Boston Scott to a 1-year, $3 million deal. And they also signed James Bradbury, re-signing Bradbury, who obviously was public enemy number 1 after the Super Bowl with the hold, even though we don't blame James. We don't blame him at all. The refs could have not called that. The field could have been better, but we don't blame James for honestly betting on himself after getting cut by the Giants, betting on himself and getting a deal here from the Eagles on a 3-year, $38 million deal that includes $20 million guaranteed, which is kind of low for him, especially for what we saw being reported saying that he could have gone elsewhere for more money. He obviously decided and opted to stay with the Eagles, Harrison. So team making a lot of moves. Running back look like it's going to be a brand new face there with no more Miles. Like I said, Bradbury's back, but let's jump on that offense first, right? Do you think that the Eagles are done addressing the backfield with the addition of Penny? And where do we think Miles Sanders go? Because now he's pretty much out the door, as he tweeted, on Twitter saying, thanking the city of Philadelphia, the Miles Sanders era is over. And that's disappointing to me, but it's all right.
I think it is over. I think, honestly, the writing was kind of on the wall, even if you look at it last year, kind of looking at it like Miles is going into that contract year next year. That's probably
and he balled out. I give him a contract year.
He
He turned it on. Especially fantasy managers. He turned it on.
Ideally, in a normal year, you would kind of say he made himself a lot of money. The running back market this year really has not been, conducive to that. Even going back to Josh Jacobs and Saquon getting franchise tagged at the $10 million mark, that has really hurt the market. And then there's guys who are, could potentially be up for trade. Is Dalvin Cook available? And just in general,
the draft class too.
There's a lot of running backs always, every year. It feels like 4th, 5th round. Isaiah Pacheco, 7th round last year. Taste Clyde Edwards-Helaire job. It's just tough to invest that money into a running back when you really don't know year to year what you're going to get from a different player. So it's nothing against these talented running backs. It's a great group of running backs in the NFL right now. I mean, every week we see unbelievable performances, 200 yards, 300, crazy numbers, but it just really hasn't played out for Miles Sanders to be, a free agent running back at the right time. Predictions for where he'll land, I don't know. For some reason, Arizona has always made a little bit of sense to me with James Conner kind of being a little bit of a duo there. Chicago makes some sense to me. Them losing David Montgomery, I think that could be a role that he steps into. I mean, Washington doesn't really need a running back, but maybe Washington join in with Gibson and Robinson just to kind of finish up that group. And then for the Eagles, I don't think they're done adding a running back, and I think it's going to be through the draft. I think Rashard Penny will be their veteran. I think Trey Sermon is another guy who could be a quote-unquote veteran who's in for a bigger role. Kenneth Gainwell is obviously going to step into a big role. But I really look at their third pick, their third-round pick after their 2 first-round picks. I think that's where they're probably going to be looking running back. It's at the back end of that top 100. There's going to be a lot of running backs left on the board. 2 names that pop into my mind right off the bat: Tyjae Spears from Tulane, and then Chase Brown from Illinois. 2 really talented running backs, had outstanding numbers and film this year, but the numbers really jump out. Some of the crazy stat lines they put up. And then, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I've been, starting to put together my mock for this year. It'll be coming out soon. I don't hate Jahmyr Gibbs at 30 from Alabama. The elusive, he's an electric playmaker, just absolutely breakaway speed. Started his career down at Georgia Tech in their offense, made a lot of plays for them. If the Eagles, if they get someone they really love at 10, they've kind of afforded themselves the luxury.
Right. I was just about to say, because you're not taking Bijan at 10.
Yes.
You're not doing that. But like you said, at 30, if you hit on the guy that you want at 10, like you said, it affords you to say, all right, we can take a running back here at the end of the first, which is almost like the beginning of the second round, and not feel too horrible about it or feel like it has to pan out type of play.
I agree. Potentially trade back. That's something Howie's always been, known to do. So I think that's how they'll do it. And also just looking at the Eagles' history, look at who the Eagles' successful running backs have been, even Miles, but, Brian Westbrook back in the day, LaShawn McCoy. It usually is Kenneth Gainwell. Yeah. It usually is guys who are drafted, in that mid-day 2, day 3 range. It's a nice sweet spot for the Eagles. They've had a lot of success doing it over the years. I think a lot of their free agent running backs haven't really panned out. You look at DeMarco Murray, Ryan Matthews.
God.
Exactly, right. I think that's kind of, all this Austin Eckler chatter with Austin Eckler on the trade block and could the Eagles go get Eckler? It's kind of reminded me of Ryan Matthews when we went out and added a former Chargers running back. And, what do you think about Eckler?
I mean, Eckler in his offense, in the Eagles' offense, would be dynamic, right? Because he gives them a pass catcher who he gives them a runner and a pass catcher, which they really hadn't had that combination, right? Gainwell could be that, but Gainwell's not like RB1. He's RB2 in that mold. And he's shown that he can carry the ball and be effective in the pass game. Same thing with Boston Scott, but Eckler's on a different level.
You're right.
However, I would have thought Eckler was the option if they didn't sign a guy like Rashard Penny, who has only played in 50% of all his career games, which is mildly concerning. But granted, they see the deal that they gave him. It's not really a crazy deal, but I think for Rashard Penny, he's probably feeling as if I see what the Eagles running game have done over the couple of years, and behind this offensive line, maybe I can replicate that same success and parlay into a bigger payday, either here or with, the Eagles. The thing is for him, right? Can he stay healthy? That's going to be the key, because he's also coming off of a fractured tibia last season, which cut his season short. And then Kenneth Walker came in and, stole the show and took it from there. So
objectively looked better in the Seattle backfield. He really did. I mean, and that's a compliment to Kenneth Walker, who's a fantastic player, but that's kind of more of a, +1 to the draft conversation. Kenneth Walker was a second-round pick last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can
One
get
of the
running
one of the
backs
better
later.
running backs in last year's class with him and Brees Hall, who many
Yep.
thought like, yo, these guys could be late first round guys, and they end up getting backed into the second round where they're outstanding players in their situation. So yeah, Eagles, like you said, likely will probably go running back. We don't know who they're going to pick because we haven't really seen them like connected to any like running back, in terms of like workouts or visits or things like that. We only have what we have from the combine, but I don't think we have anybody a note from the combine. I want to say
Not
the
off the top of my
only.
head. A lot of it will be how the board shakes out. That's how it always, and especially for the Eagles, a lot of times they let the board kind of shake how it's going to in those later rounds, and then they look for their guy. Similar to what they did for Juergens last year.
The only running backs that they had spoke with at the combine were Roshan Johnson out of Texas, Jamar Gibbs, like you said, from Alabama, and Kendry Miller from TCU. Only 3 running backs that they spoke with.
Johnson could be another good late rounder. Maybe that 6th round pick.
Yeah.
That could be another one. Like, that's what I'm saying, though. There will be running backs there. Even if they wait till the end of the draft, even if they wait till undrafted free agents, like they will add to the running back room. It'll be a different group than they started with.
Sounds like an open competition in the Eagles backfield, I feel like.
Yeah, and they'll probably flow and roll with the hot hand a lot next year.
Yeah.
Like, who's running the ball well? Is it Gainwell today? Is it Penny today? Is it insert draftable player here today? Like, whoever the case may be, like, who's running the ball well? Who's having success in the offense? Who kind of has the hot hand that day?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's going to be something like that because now with no Sanders, you will be more afforded to do a running back by committee. Even though I think Sanders was okay with it, still it's different, right?
I was literally even going to say, like, was Miles like a real one though?
No,
even last year. I mean, that's kind of what
he was like. He was like a 1.5.
Yeah,
and just how the Eagles use their running game.
The playoffs, especially, man, Gainwell was running well. That's who they went with. And, I kind of feel like that's how they were.
Yeah, and like I said to you before pre-show, I think what was telling for Sanders was his early play in the Super Bowl where he just didn't hit the hole. Instead of taking it up, he cut it to the edge and then, not picking up the path, no, was it the path pro or whether he didn't hit? I think he didn't hit the hole when he carried the ball, and it was just like, yeah, this ain't. We didn't see much of Miles in the Super Bowl. Now, granted, I think he was dealing with like an injury. I think wasn't he like injured? But we saw more. We saw more Gainwell and Scott than we did Sanders, and I think that kind of did it for him. But I still think he can be a very good running back in this league. I think. For a guy that was drafted second round, aka Saquon's backup in college, I think he had a good NFL career to this point. I think he's had 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons. I think
definitely this year. I feel like
I know
he
this
had
year,
one early. Yeah,
this year he definitely did have it. And let me see. Yeah, this year first 1,000-yard rushing season, and he was healthy. Played all 17 games, 11 rushing touchdowns, just outstanding. 4.9 yards per carry, which is nothing to sneeze at. At his thing, he's actually been pretty good yards per carry most of his career. And obviously, he wasn't used as much as a passer as he was in his rookie year. I think people forget he had over 500 yards of receiving, over 500 receiving yards as a rookie. I think people forget about that. So there's going to be spots for him. It's just where does he go, right? Like I said, I think he's going to be all right. Now, granted, will I miss saying feed Miles Sanders on Eagle Sundays? Yes, because when he's rolling, he's rolling. But it's the NFL, right? With running backs, like we talked about, right? Most of them don't stay with the team on a second contract. It's few and far in between. And Sanders is going to end up in a good spot, right? You're thinking like you do all the teams earlier. I could definitely see him there. I would say Indianapolis with Steichen, but they have Jonathan Taylor, right? I could say Jacksonville, but they have ETN.
Right, and they got rid of Robinson last year.
So I'm thinking of where our former Eagles that he could be somewhere. Like you said, Arizona out there with Gannon could be an
Yeah,
option.
and I like James Conner a lot, man. James Conner's a really talented back, but
But Sanders
certainly
would
could
be the
help. Yeah,
offset
right.
off of him there. I'm trying to think where Denver, but they
With
just signed.
Javante.
But they just signed Samaje Perine, I think.
Okay. Yeah, listen,
His
wherever it
market
is.
is going to develop after
Yeah,
probably
but
closer
wherever
to
it
the
is, it's
draft.
probably a 1-year deal or maybe a 1+1 where there's an
Yeah,
option for a second
yeah.
year. Like it's probably not long term at this point.
Yeah, and if he's healthy, he's going to be good. And then, like I said, we'll see where he goes because right now you're trying to think where he could land at. It's kind of murky with a
It
lot of
is,
running
yeah.
backs because even Kareem's not a free agent. So I mean,
Yeah, and then this conversation we're having about the Eagles applies to every other team in the NFL too. Like there will be running backs when they're drafting in the 3rd and 4th round, and Bijan has to go somewhere, wherever that may be. Maybe it's early in the 1st, maybe it's the end of the 1st to the Bills or someone like that. But Bijan's going to go somewhere, so there's a lot of options at running back this year. The market as a whole at running back is very cloudy. I mean, Saquon and Jacobs getting the 1-year $10 million franchise.
right.
It really tells you kind of what teams are thinking at running back right now.
I do like the idea of Sanders in Chicago. I do like that idea a lot to pair with Khalil Herbert and the style of both of them.
And it kind of goes to the flow of what they're doing this offseason too. They're spending money. Like they're trying to add veteran players to help, make Justin Fields. And they've got Justin Fields on his rookie deal right now. They've got this 9th pick coming up. They just added the 61st. They've got future draft capital. Claypool's there. So I think Miles Sanders will be a nice little fit for the Bears as well. And like you mentioned with Herbert, I really like that yin and yang in the backfield.
So, hey, we'll see how it pans out for the Eagles backfield. Because like you said, they're probably going to be busy. We'll see where Sanders market kind of shapes up here as well. This is Total Sports Live Podcast here on Anchor. I keep on saying Anchor. Anchor. Jovan
Let's roll with it for now.
Right. We're just going to roll with it for now. Talking Eagles free agency here on the podcast here. And let's talk about I was going to rant on Rashad Penny, but I won't do that. I'll save that for the late in the summer.
We got to get Keaton on here for that.
Yeah.
Keaton was a big Rashad Penny guy, fantasy-wise.
Rashad Penny guy. Yeah. Let's talk about the Eagles defense. So Eagles keeping James Bradbury, like we said, 3-year deal. 3-year deal, worth what, 30-something million, 20-something guaranteed or something like that. I just read it. I just wanted to tweet up.
I think it's 38.
Yeah, 38.
20 guaranteed flat. I'm pretty sure.
20 guaranteed flat. Yeah. So they have him. Your thoughts on the Eagles keeping them, and then what do you think happens with the rest of the secondary? Because we've heard Darius Slay's name, being not mentioned in trade rumors, but the Eagles allowing his representation to go seek out and a new opportunity for him if he so pleases. And obviously they have the 10th overall pick in the draft, and a lot of people think that this could be a spot where they take a Devin, Witherspoon, or they take a Christian Gonzalez, or even a Joey Porter Jr., who a lot of people aren't talking about at number 10, which I find mildly interesting. That is really much Witherspoon, Gonzalez, or bust, and not Joey Porter Jr., but I digress. What do you think about this Eagles secondary? Also CJGJ and what happens with him?
Well, quickly, because I'm in the draft room. I think Cam Smith is my favorite corner in this class from South Carolina. It's a very good corner class, and that's something we're going to talk about with Chris in a few days about the Bears. Like that's another spot where they could look. They might have the best available corner. For the Eagles, I was actually surprised to see Bradbury get the deal he did today. Pleasantly surprised, I'll add. I'm glad to see Bradbury back. I think that's someone that a lot of people had kind of just factored in was probably going to be playing elsewhere next year. It just seemed like it with CJGJ, expiring, and Hargrave, will they bring him back? It felt like Bradbury was kind of going to be one of the guys that didn't come back. The way it's played out, the fact that they were able to get him back, definitely a good thing. The deal gives me a little bit of pause. You saw my reaction in the group chat. I put the little hands over the face emoji. And it's a little bit of money for a guy who's really had 1 year where we're really saying James Bradbury is a lockdown corner. Always was a good corner. Always was a respectable corner early in the career in Carolina and then with New York. I think it surprised me too, in part because you've got the Darius Slay trade rumors right now. You've got him, talking about his contract and, maybe not wanting to restructure or wanting more, whatever the case may be, whatever's really going on behind closed doors. And then CJGJ, that's been the guy that, Eagles fans and Eagles media have been talking about in terms of like, one person you need to re-sign. Who is it?
Right.
They're saying it's CJGJ. Back to the draft, I'm a big fan of Brian Branch at 10 from Alabama. I think he gives you a lot of what CJ gives you. The versatility to be able to play safety, to be able to play in the nickel, can cover in man, can drop in zone and deep zones. So maybe that's a part of it. Maybe they feel like it's harder to find a true elite corner, and they think Bradbury and Slay is that, and they can kind of rework the secondary in the deep part of the secondary at safety. Lost Marcus Epps to the Raiders, potentially losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I was surprised to see Bradbury get the deal today. Like I said, pleasantly surprised. I'm happy to see him back in the secondary. I think it's good for Desai, the new defensive coordinator with the Eagles.
You need continuity. Definitely want to have continuity.
And you need good corners. Like this is something we've seen in Philly for like a decade before last year.
It's a passing league. It's a passing league too.
And the Eagles have always gotten towards the corner. They've always had struggles finding corners that they can trust and finding reliable corners. So if Bradbury's the guy that you trust, if you think that he's a really reliable number 2, I feel comfortable with that. I think this is something I'm interested to hear your thoughts on. I'd have a little bit of pause if they trade Slay and Bradbury's the one. Maybe if they had a rookie corner alongside him, is that still a strong secondary with Avonte Maddox in the slot?
I think the Eagles would take their chances with that.
It's better than some secondaries. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I think they would take that chance to do that because you have a veteran in Bradbury who's kind of going about his business a little quiet. We haven't really heard from him. He's kind of stay on the radar. And obviously, Slay's cap hit is really high. I think it's $26 million.
Yeah, he's getting paid.
So there's a lot there. And could they move him? Yeah, but you're looking at I think the value for Slay is going down just because you look at what Ramsey got traded for. A third. Stephon Gilmore, a 5th.
Yeah.
Knowing the Eagles or thinking that I know the Eagles, I don't think Howie Roseman wants to give away Darius Slay for a day 3 pick.
Why? Why? And that's what I come back to with Gilmore and Waller. Gilmore, I guess, makes a little more sense for the Colts if it's just, not really.
Yeah, because you're rebuilding.
Right. Like, I get that.
Coach and Steichen.
Waller for basically a 4th for a back end 3rd. Like if they were to trade Slay for a 3rd, it would be not
apparently with the Waller thing, there was like some drama with that.
I heard about that. You never know what's really going on, so maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I heard about that.
Which is wild if that's the case.
Right. If you want to elaborate on it, I don't know the full, but I saw the tweet.
Yeah, I saw the tweet from Vic Taffer
from The Athletic. Yeah,
from The Athletic, and he said. What did he say? He said, where was the tweet at? I had it too. Looking for
about Waller's
marriage. Yeah. Said the trade comes 10 days after Darren Waller's wedding to Aces guard Kelsey Plum. The timing of this is only interesting because Josh McDaniels accidentally leaked the news of his wedding to reporters at the Scouting Combine. Waller was upset with McDaniels when the Las Vegas Review-Journal posted a story announcing the wedding was scheduled later in the week. The couple had not publicly announced their plans to get married.
Hey man, got to keep people's business.
Protect people's
business, man.
Yeah.
Especially stuff like that. You can't be talking about it to media and
especially if it's not coming from me.
Was that the reason that Waller got traded? Who knows? It's tough to really say. I'm sure
it'd be crazy if that was the case.
It would. It really would.
Because we did see Raiders players react. Josh Jacobs reacted, and he did not take too kindly.
Yeah.
And this is the issue with Bill Belichick disciples becoming head coaches. They start doing dumb stuff and don't really work out too well. And trading a guy like Darren Waller does not make sense, even though I know they did get Jacoby Myers to add to that wide receiving core. You just don't trade a tight end of that caliber.
Especially because you just added in Jimmy G. And who was Jimmy G's arguably his top target in San Francisco? Debo
George Kittle.
There you go. And what did the Patriots do for years?
Go to the tight end.
So very surprising move. I like the Jacoby Myers addition. I'm a big Jacoby guy. I've been a fan of him since the NC State days. Former quarterback, caught like 100 passes his senior year at NC State. Thought that was a great addition to what they have. Devontae, Renfro, Jacoby Myers, Darren Waller. No more Darren Waller. Jacoby Myers is that bigger body target possession guy, but it doesn't replace what a tight end brings to the offense. 2 completely different positions, different players. I was surprised to see it. It definitely, that move really caught me by surprise. Good move for the Giants.
Oh yeah, if you're the Giants, it's an excellent move
Slam
because
dunk, yeah.
you get a guaranteed target in the middle of that field that can help out, whatever else they do at wide receiver, because wide receiver they are still lacking. You can't go in the next season with, Shepard, Hodgins,
Yeah, I
and
think they're drafting someone at 25 for
they have
receiver.
to. They
Yeah.
have to. You can't go into the season with Shepard, Hodgins, Richie James. You can't.
Whoever falls, basically, out of
Yeah.
Quentin Johnson. I love Jordan Addison. I don't think I'd be frustrated if Jordan Addison falls. I think Jordan Addison is top 15, but Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, like whoever falls, I think the Giants will get at 25.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. See how the Eagles secondary, how they kind of shore things up there. CJ GJ, probably the longer this goes, maybe there's a chance he comes back because the safety market hasn't been looking too hot, really. We saw Jesse Bates get that high deal, but then everything else has kind of been in that $6 to $8 million, $10 million a year per year range. So maybe there's a chance that the Eagles do get him back, and they do. Then that sets up your secondary for long-term success. But we'll see. Speaking of the defense, before we wrap up, let's talk about this. Like you said, the Eagles gained some pieces, and some players today, but they also lost some players. Javon Hargrave signed a massive 4-year deal with the 49ers. TJ Edwards signed a 3-year deal with the Bears as they, continue to revamp their team around Justin Fields. Marcus Epps signed a 2-year deal with the Raiders, and Kazir White is going to Arizona with Jonathan Gannon. So, Harrison, what do you make of all these moves? Did you think that any of those guys were coming back? And who do you think's leaving next if you think anybody else is leaving? And just this defense going into the future, they're going to be dependent on a lot of young players to step up and play large roles going into next year, unless they start adding some veterans on like 1 to 2 year type deals.
Yeah, which I could see. I could see them adding some veterans. I'm sure you'll remember a few years ago they went out and added like Ryan Kerrigan on a 1-year deal. Last year they traded for
that didn't work so well.
It did not. Last year they traded for Robert Quinn, signed Sue and Linval Joseph. Like I think they'll do that on the defense.
Robert Quinn didn't work out well either in that trade.
It didn't, man. And you look back at that 2021 season, I think that's a big reason that Sam Desai was such a popular defensive coordinator was that 2021 season in Chicago. Robert Quinn had a bunch of sacks. Looking at these first two departures, Javon Hargrave and TJ Edwards, there's two logical replacements right on the roster from the 2021 National Championship team down at Georgia, Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, two guys who made some plays, but certainly are expected to be a big part of the Eagles defense moving forward.
A lot of pressure now. You might be thrust into that starting role instead of
it's their time to step up.
Playing backup snaps.
It's their time to step up. I remember last year when we did our draft pod, Nakobe Dean was someone we were talking about for the Eagles in the first round. So the fact that he fell to the third round was a surprise to a lot of people. I think that he's a really quality player. I think he'll be one of the better players in that class. So I'm looking forward to seeing him maybe take over a little bit at middle linebacker. TJ Edwards was a really good find, a really good success story for the Eagles, going from undrafted free agent to a starter. Great to see him go and get a big contract from the Bears, 3-year deal. Similar to Jordan Hicks a few years ago, though, when he went to the Cardinals. I mean, it kind of made sense, and it kind of made sense for TJ Edwards to go too. Really quality middle linebacker, helped them go on a Super Bowl run, similar to Hicks. But is he a top 15, top tier middle linebacker? Exactly, no, probably not.
But for a guy, and I think we give him this credit, right? For a guy with an undrafted free agent. Definitely outperformed his ceiling
100%
to even get to a second contract
and a really serviceable
his first big contract.
Really serviceable linebacker in the NFL too. Like he's no slouch at all. And then the Bears got Edmonds as well. That's a nice linebacking core now. But like I said, Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis really makes sense to step up. Marcus Epps signing a 2-year deal with the Raiders, another one. Happy to see him go and get that deal. Made sense.
Another undrafted guy, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Which is why I really, and we talked about this at running back. Going back to running back real quick, it's why I'm not particularly concerned about that room, and it's why I'm not particularly concerned about some of these losses on defense as well. The Eagles have a history of hitting on late round and UDFA guys. So Marcus Epps and Kazir White. Two guys that aren't necessarily, huge losses. I think out of that group, if anybody I projected to come back, maybe Kazir White. If they lose TJ Edwards and then you put him next to Nakobe Dean.
Right.
Like, I like that linebacker core.
Because now your linebacker unit's really thin right now.
And it's very young, man. Very young.
You don't have – I'm trying to think who's, like, left right now at
I don't think they have many guys that have
linebacker.
started a lot of NFL games. I'll put it to you like that. When we're talking about the
I'm
1
looking
year,
at their depth chart right now. Linebacker, middle linebacker, it's Nakobe Dean and nobody else.
do they still have?
Will outside linebacker. We're talking Sean Bradley, Christian Ellis, and Davion Taylor.
I was just going to ask you about Davion Taylor. I was just going to ask you if they still have him. That was a
Eagles got to get busy, man, because even their defensive line depth is not looking good.
Yeah, compared to last year, certainly not. They had the craziest defensive line depth
ever.
I think they'll address a lot of it through the draft and UDFAs. I think that's kind of how they've done things historically.
And getting those veterans on like a 1 to 2 year deal to see what they can kind of, pull and grasp from them. Because like you said, you can't go in the next season with like, yo, man, we're starting out there, Jordan Davis and Milton Williams in the middle and Nakobe Dean playing behind them. I know Eagle fans are
back?
No
shot.
I don't see Fletch coming back
with Howie Roseman as GM. Sentimental?
No, I don't see it happening just because they released them. Remember to get that money down. So I would be shocked.
That last year too, though. Fletch was on free agency last year, I think. Talking about Jordan Davis and Milton Williams,
I would be shocked, and I also feel like Fletch, I feel like Cox, I feel like he's. I don't want to say long in the tooth at this point, but I think it's time to see what you get from the younger guys.
I think so too.
Because I envision like Jordan Davis being like Fletcher Cox 2.0, and I envision Milton Williams being Javon Hargrave 2.0, just because of his ability to pass rush too, which I think people are very underrating that ability of his. So I think, like you said, right, they're going to pick up guys in the draft. Like we already know, the Eagles, they love drafting themselves some offensive linemen, some defensive linemen.
Yep,
they
especially
love to
interior.
draft. Right, they love to draft those guys, develop them up, see what they can get out of them. And then, like we said, free agency is still young. Even though we're seeing all these deals and being reported and money flying around.
That's a great point.
There's still a lot of guys out there that they can go attack and try to get, because they're going to need some. They're definitely going to need some depth here. You're talking about there's really no edge depth behind Brandon Graham, who they got back who re-signed for 1 year. You're going to need depth behind him. Do they bring back Derek Barnett, who missed most of the season with an injury? I think that they do.
It would make sense for both parties.
I think he will return. Defensive tackle depth, you're going to need some defensive tackle depth there. Linebacker, safety without what's the name?
Without safety just got thin quick.
Yeah, without with no CJ Garner-Johnson under contract, you're looking at Reed Blankenship. I can honestly see
Kevon Wallace, right?
Right. Yeah. And I can honestly see Reed Blankenship being the starter where Epps was starting at. Honestly, I could see that happening.
I'd like an improvement. I bro, ideal world. I'd go.
You're not sold on the Middle Tennessee State Blue Raider missile himself.
Hey man, he's another one. It's like TJ Edwards. Like he outplayed being an undrafted free agent from Middle Tennessee State.
Yeah.
But is Reed Blankenship who you want to go into the year with? Maybe not. I would love CJ GJ re-signed. And then, we'll see what the mock winds up looking like. But I've come back to Brian Branch from Alabama a lot for his versatility and what he could do in the Eagles secondary. I think that would be a really, a nice duo at safety. Two really versatile guys who can play different roles, can step up in the box and go cover in the slot. If Avonte Maddox misses time, you've got two guys who are highly capable of covering the slot. So I think that would be my ideal world safety situation. But I honestly could see a world where it's Kevon Wallace, Reed Blankenship, and someone like Anthony Harris, maybe not Anthony Harris, but a veteran like Anthony Harris in that role.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see it. So I think it's gonna be fun and interesting to see how they build the rest of this team out, because right now, like you said, it's a lot of holes. Thankfully, they don't have to worry about the offense. Like offense is pretty much locked and secure, so now they can focus and shift their attention.
Maybe guard.
Guard. Yeah, because
if Juergens isn't the guy,
there's a possibility that Fayamalu does move on.
Maybe guard, but you're right. Offense is pretty set, and I think Cam Juergens is probably the guy who they're going to slate to start at right guard.
I can see
left
it.
guard.
I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see it until it's time for him to move over to center, because the Eagles like to get their guys in, get them in, and shoot, maybe you never know. Maybe he becomes a very good guard. So then you have to figure out what you're going to do at center. But that's a whole nother whole nother podcast for a whole nother day. One more note before we wrap up. I forgot to mention this. We did see a report late last night from Aaron Wilson saying that Jacoby Brissett has drawn interest from teams including the Buccaneers and the Eagles at the start of free agency. Jacoby Brissett as a backup quarterback here in Philadelphia, it seems like everybody is in down with the idea. I'm okay with Jacoby being the backup because I've been a Jacoby guy since like when he was coming out in the draft, the Carson Wentz draft, which is amazing. He's in the Carson Wentz draft. How would Jacoby Brissett, Eagles interested? Makes sense, right? Backup quarterback at this. We need backup for Jalen Hurts. Gardner Minshew really didn't do it for you. Jacoby upgrade over Gardner Minshew.
I love it. And I'm a big Jacoby Brissett fan on the field. I thought he ran the Browns offense better than Deshaun Watson did this year. I'll stand on that all day. Yeah, I'll stand on that all day. I love it more than anything because Sirianni and him are super tight from Jacoby's time in Indianapolis. Like I read a quote. Yeah, I read a quote saying that Sirianni's like kids ask about Jacoby, and it's like a real like they're actually like buddies, get along really well. Obviously, Jacoby kind of knows Nick's offensive philosophy, his system, and by all accounts, it seems like Jacoby Brissett is a really high-quality stand-up teammate. Even go back to his time in New England with Tom. I know that they really got along, and Garoppolo as well. That was a really talented quarterback room. A quarterback of that caliber, a quarterback with starting experience, slam dunk as the backup quarterback. I loved him in Miami a few years ago when he was Tua's backup.
Forgot he was in Miami, yeah.
I think he's probably like top 40, maybe top 35 NFL quarterbacks. Like he's right there. Like, we got 4, maybe 5 coming in this year in the draft that could push him back a few spots, but Jacoby is right on that 32 range. So all day, I think that's a slam dunk with his ties to Sirianni.
Yeah, slam dunk if they can get him, because you can hear the team with Buccaneers interest, and they're in flux at quarterback.
Listen, if he can go start there, go do that.
Oh yeah, no, I 100%. If you get an opportunity to start in Tampa, which is probably going to be the case, Kyle Trask. We also heard them being interested in Baker Mayfield, so there's open opportunities there for him. So we'll see, right? We'll see how that plan figures itself out, because the Eagles do need to figure out QB2, because I don't think you want to run in there with Ian Book as QB2. who was on the roster, by the way? People might not say, he was on the roster.
On there, yeah. Crazy.
He snuck on there. All right. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Total Sports Live podcast. Really appreciate everybody once again for tuning in to this very podcast. As always, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. You're checking out the website totalsportslive.com as well, and you're following the podcast on all the various platforms: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify for podcasters. There you go. I got it right. Spotify for podcasters as well. And anywhere else you get your podcast, you can find it. Trust me. Just search Total Sports Live TSL Podcast. Is right there. Give us a follow on Spotify. Leave us a review. All that good stuff on your platforms. Really appreciate it. I think that's it, right? I think we did all the house cleaning that we need to do on this pod before we wrap.
Yeah, that's good for me, man. Appreciate you as always. Looking forward to the next one. Check out the site, totalsportslive.com. And yeah, like you said, we got some podcasts coming up. It's a 2-podcast week this week. So looking forward to our next one as well.
Should be a good one. And yeah, like I said, we called an audible. We thought we was doing one podcast, and it was like, oh, the Eagles doing something. So shoot, why not fire up the podcast here in the midweek? So everyone have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the week. Hopefully we'll talk to you guys later this week. If not, enjoy the March Madness, as that will be starting up in a couple of days. I'm on Thursday. So everyone have a good one, and we'll talk to you all very soon.